On this ITAV show, North Korea is creating all sorts of malware that you're going to have to worry about. What's more dangerous, hackers or your actual users? And does the iPhone Face ID actually give you secure security? All that and more next on the ITAV show.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ITAV, episode 11, recorded Friday, November 17th, 2017. Lazy Security.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box.
This is the ITAV show, brought to you by the fine folks at AVNation. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With me this month to talk about all things ITAV and everything in between. First and foremost, his name is Derek Jonkis. He works for Extron Electronics. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely do. Anytime. Also with us, my buddy and pal that I met up in the great state of Minnesota. His name is Brad Colt. He is from HGA. How are you, sir?
Good. Staying warm this morning.
That's a trick in Minnesota.
We're good at it up here.
That, and he's also, I only have Brad on because he's a Vikings fan, and I try to be fair to everybody in the NFC North. So
No. I came over here. I'm a Wisconsin transplant. So.
Oh, screw you then.
My dad told me I can come back, go for colors on, but if I'm wearing purple, I'm not going to get in the house. And
No. See, I didn't realize. Dang it. I have enough Packers fans on my shows, between you and Haley Klein and Dave Hatz. Yeah.
If you're raised there, you bleed green and gold. It's just something that
I know. All right. Fine. They kicked our butts this week. So anyhow, Bears fans, guys, sorry. I try to make this not about a sports show, but go Bears. All right, here we go. Oh goodness, from our buddies over at Spiceworks, and actually with a couple of different stories from Spiceworks, but the first one here is the new Apple iPhone, the iPhone X or Apple iPhone 10. One of the cool things they have on it and that they sell to is they have facial recognition, facial ID, and so you can't unlock your you can set up your face to be the unlock mechanism of your phone. It was a great security leap for Apple, except it's already been beaten. It's already been broken into. Couple different ways. One was, according to the story, through twins. Okay, that's a little bit of a gimme. I'll give you that. But the other one was a mask. Brad, I want to start with you on this. When it comes to security, is facial recognition the end all to be all, or is it biometrics, or is it something else? I mean, how are we best advising clients and advising end users to secure their systems, not just AV systems, but their network as well? Well,
it depends on who that user is.
Okay.
This is brand new technology. It's untested. So I'm not going to recommend this for, some of our large Fortune 100 clients who might have very sensitive data that they're going to be concerned about. If you're a billionaire, maybe don't buy that latest and greatest technology. But this is the sort of thing we saw with Touch ID when it came out. People were finding ways to circumvent that. And that hasn't been the root of the vulnerabilities that we've been seeing since Touch ID has been around. So I think Face ID is going to fall into a very similar category where people are going to be able to continue to spoof it, and we'll see what the vulnerabilities are. It'll continue to improve, but I don't think it's the end all be all. But it seems like it's going to be at least as secure as Touch ID, if not more. And that makes me feel pretty comfortable for day to day.
In Touch ID, you're talking about the fingerprint mechanism where you can unlock your computers. Some control systems had it where you can unlock the control system or the touch of the interface with your fingerprint. So
right.
Some people refer to it as biometric security. Derek, at AVNation, our webmaster is the ever popular Mr. Bradford Ben, who is incredibly concerned about security. He gives me security updates probably on a monthly basis at this point. His big push towards security, at least with us, was something called two-factor authentication, right? Yeah. Not familiar with two-factor. It's where you try to log into something and then they send you a code of some sort, either through text or they can call you, or you can have an app that does that produces that code. So it's 2 steps.
Yeah.
Is that something that makes sense in the world of an AV system or an AV network where you have two steps, especially in mission control systems or mission critical systems, where, you know what, I really don't want anybody who's not supposed to have access to it, whether or not they have the right fingerprint or they spoof the fingerprint, or whether or not they have the right facial recognition, to have a secondary login mechanism?
Yeah, I think so. Oftentimes I think just like you would do with your own personal security, whether it's your car keys or what you do when you get home at your house, what you do when you get to work, usually there are very, very subtle things that we use, I'll call this lazy two-factor, just in our normal lives. And so from a technology perspective, I think it is a good strategy to mix a couple of different things, a couple different ways for you to confirm either who you are or what you can get to.
Okay.
And like I said, I think we do this all the time. We just don't realize that we're doing it. It's just as humans, as people. When you begin to apply it to technology, I kind of agree with Brad a little bit as well, that there's going to be some use cases where something like Face ID or even two-factor authentication, there might be some hurdles that are very difficult to get over technology-wise. But then there's some other very subtle things that you can do. I'm kind of a fond and firm believer that two-factor authentication is important, but just having something a little greater than step over height and more than one of those kind of things to access things that you don't want others to have access to. In other words, to say a little more simply, if you have something that's very, very valuable, don't make it the thing that's the most accessible to those that might also find it to be valuable, right?
Okay.
So just to even simplify it even further, never try to go with what you can get to from the keyboard that you can also get to easier with the hammer, right? Because if I could break into something physically and take it quicker than getting out a keyboard, the big thing is that, hacking and those kind of things take time. And people want something, I think, in general that gets us the greatest results. So I think, appropriate security probably has to be applied in the measure in which, someone values that which they're trying to protect. And sometimes we do it because we have policies or standards. Other times we're just fearful about the potential liability and the vulnerabilities that, we may not know about. So I think that's what gives rise to things like what Apple might have to offer. I also think that's what gives rise to, customers that might come to Brad, for example, and say, I've seen this latest thing, I'd like to implement it. And then it's, kind of like Brad's job to really interpret that and see, for example, how that might apply in the application, being the customer's advocate, for example.
So you mentioned something real quick. I want to get a definition of it. You said lazy two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
What is lazy two-factor authentication?
I think lazy two-factor is the kind of two-factor that you don't know that you're doing all the time. So whether it's how you having like the key to your car and a key fob and something that you need to get in your house, right? For example, if the only way you can open up your garage door opener is to get into your car because you have a remote inside of your car, you're actually doing some two-factor. It's something you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something you know. I know where the button is in my car, right? To
Okay.
open the garage door. And I'm giving a very, very simple explanation. And in AV systems, we have a lot of those types of barriers, right? In order to get to a meeting, you have to be invited to a meeting. You have to know where that meeting is located, right?
Yep.
In order to get to that part of the building, maybe you have to swipe a card. Okay. Maybe you're going to show up and you're going to have your iPhone in your pocket or your Android device, right? So, this is where Bradford is correct. There's a lot of ways that we can improve these things, but you don't have to work really hard. You just have to make it a lot harder for somebody to take something via that vector than it would be than if it wasn't in place. I mean, if you can just add a little bit of a barrier there, that person is going to be interested maybe in some other aspect of what you might have to offer, and avoid that altogether, right?
Yeah, make it more difficult than it's actually worth to get in the long run. So.
Yeah.
So Tim, when we're touching on two-factor at the root of it really being something you have and something you know.
Yeah.
That could be the biometrics plus PIN. It doesn't have to be something that's getting sent to you. Some people find that to be inconvenient, and security and convenience are always at odds, and we're always working on balancing that for our clients. And so when I looked at the story, I kind of thought about how can we use the biometrics to make the entire meeting process easier for our clients, more frictionless and seamless. And that got me thinking about, I'd love to be able to walk into a room and biometrically authenticate So now I'm on the network, I have file system access, and then take it another step further. I want to be able to make it easier for people to join meetings. That seems to be a pain point that a lot of our clients have.
Okay.
If I can, I like the idea of keeping this on the phone rather than maybe building it into one of Derek's control systems. I like the way that Apple has implemented the secure enclave. So all your biometric data is stored locally on your phone and encrypted. It's not going back to somebody else's servers. So the chances that that's going to get hacked, or you're going to see a massive hack where everybody's information is being compromised, are really reduced. Okay, so now I have that information on my phone. I'm in the room, I'm authenticating, and it sees I have a meeting, and it can go ahead and start launching my meeting for me. And of course, we want some way to be able to decide whether we're going to be going live right away. I don't know if that's just having some of the muting controls within the meeting software, or giving me one simple button that I push and just say go.
Yeah.
But all of our clients would love to be able to get to that level of simplicity where all you have to do is push one button and everything happens for you. And that's difficult to do at this point, but I can see a lot of these things tying together that can potentially give us that sort of functionality.
Well, and you're not wrong. Actually, it was with the AVEX's AVEC conference last week with my buddy Steve Greenblatt, who's a control programmer and owns Control Concepts, which is an independent control house. And he was even saying less than one button, right? He's being asked to create systems where it does tie in either a device, whether that's a mobile device or a key fob or something like that, with an RFID. And where it does walk into and you do walk into the room, and it starts, right? It no buttons at all. Like once the meeting organizer walks into the room and it authenticates and says, yes, Brad is there, now we can launch without anything at all. It's getting there. I'm not going to say it's ubiquitous at this point, because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of back end work that has to be done for all those little systems to work together. But it's slowly getting there. I think, at least. So, all right, let's talk about the U.S. president's favorite topic in the world. That's North Korea. That's North Korea. The government, not President Trump, but the actual, the rest of the government is warning that the quote unquote North Korea state-sponsored hackers have been targeting the aerospace, telecommunications, and finance sectors since 2016 with malware that can secretly take over a computer. This is from PC Magazine. Derek, I want to start with you on this. Malware is something that you have to have. It gets inside your system, right? It gets inside. The computer is predominantly the best way to do that. But there has been instances of malware inside systems that aren't inherently quote unquote a PC or a computer. A number of years ago, Stuxnet virus and malware was put all over the Iranian nuclear systems. So not unheard of, not exactly out of the question here. So the question to you guys is, and Eric, we'll start with you. How do we keep our networks safe from malware? How do we keep them, to where you can't, take them over because somebody has downloaded a malicious piece of code?
Well, in these day and age, I think that's every IT administrator's biggest fear and biggest operational concern is every day you wake up, and no matter how many computers, servers, or resources you have, how do I keep my user community safe? And one of the things I think that in our neck of the woods, in our business, on the AV side, is that we have all these products that sometimes we install once. They might be running an operating system of some kind, right? And how often are we kind of working with our user community to make sure that those systems that we installed, that we advocated for, that we help to maintain, that those things are also updated? And also, too, to make sure that those customers, that whatever we're doing on the AV side is sort of cohesive and sticky to what their policies might be at that company. And the companies that, I've had the opportunity to talk to, there's certainly, I would say a lot of companies now, I can't think of one that we may have spoken with that doesn't have some kind of plan or hasn't formulated some set of goals or criteria for what security means to them. So in many ways, they've tackled that. But, and there are some ways our AV devices are fairly unique, typically embedded systems, isolated devices wrapped in metal for the most part. And, they take different workflows sometimes to keep updated. I think the interesting thing, actually the most interesting thing to point out about this for me was that anybody in our AV community can actually just sign up, because I do. The Department of Homeland Security actually issues alerts daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. They list every threat. They also list any new vulnerabilities are found, and it's a free email service. And I found it to be, personally, to be a very easy way to stay on top of what's going on out there. So for me, the best message here is to be informed.
Yep.
And this article was just generated based on that alert, which I also received as well. So I don't know if you guys have seen that yet.
I haven't, but I'll take a look at it, and we'll put a link to it on this episode's page. Yeah, I like that a lot. My main source has always been Stux on security. And I'm sorry, Krebs on security. And so, yeah, I didn't know about this. I'll have to take a look at it.
Yeah, no problem.
Brad, interesting thing this week with this. I was at a buddy of mine. I still program for a couple guys, and I was at his job site, and in talking with the IT department of this hospital, they are getting to roll out a new security feature. I call it a feature. They call it a feature. They're disabling the USB of all of their computers. Now, this is a hospital that just invested a sizable chunk of money in Barco ClickShares. If you're not familiar with Barco ClickShares is ran by USB ports. Understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
That the IT department, the security team of the IT department, is disabling all their facilities deployed laptops. They're disabling the USB devices, the USB
Sounds like
ports.
the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand.
Well, that was part of the conversation, actually. The reason they're doing this is because of malware, right? They're doing it to eliminate the ability for any outside, unknown port or unknown drive to come into their network. And they're still having that conversation, by the way, because of my conversation with their IT guy. And yes, malware is an issue, and yes, that's one way to do it. That's one way to cut off the snake's head, as it were, is to eliminate the ability for anybody to bring in an infected USB drive. But how else can these well-intentioned IT folks, who their job is to keep the network up and safe and free from any sort of foreign code, how are they supposed to make sure that they don't have an infection, they don't have an attack?
Well, I'm assuming that they're software disabling those USB ports rather than cementing over them.
Yes, sir. Yes. At least that was the impression. You're right. They did not say they were cementing over them. I may have to suggest that to them.
But that's how the Stuxnet worm was spread, was through thumb drives that into computers. So I think that is something that's a valid concern. Potentially, each client's going to have to evaluate their risk tolerance on that. The networks are getting smarter, and we're seeing better tools for being able to detect anomalies. So they're able to start detecting when user behavior is anomalous, or when they're starting to see traffic patterns that don't look like normal. So I think that's important. And being able to provide the tools so that the onus isn't on the end user to be able to know when they're going to be vulnerable is going to be the way we're going to be able to solve this, because we try and train people, and we have a lot of federal government clients. So we go through training on cybersecurity, and don't click that link, don't open that attachment, those kind of best practices. But at the end of the day, I think it'd be better if we had some tools in place that are able to make it easier for the end users. So you don't need to have a degree in computer science to be able to operate your phone or your laptop. But I'd almost like to go in another direction here and go on a little bit of a rant about what isn't the right way to solve this.
Okay.
And you see, Congress bring up the idea of, we want back doors into the encryption so that we can get access, and law enforcement is able to go in there and find the bad guys, right? Well, I think anybody who understands how this technology really works understands that what we're doing is opening up holes that the bad guys are going to be able to exploit. And that scares the heck out of me. And I want to make sure that we're rational in the way we're approaching this.
You mean like the back door that the government had into Microsoft Windows operating system, and then that the Experian people didn't plug, and then lost half of the U.S. Population's Social Security numbers? That one?
Wouldn't know anything about that.
No, I don't know anything about that either. Nothing. Yeah. Yeah,
We don't know anything.
we don't know anything. And all it took was a patch, a Windows update to solve that. And one person didn't do that patch. Yeah, nothing about that at all.
Yeah, so we can eliminate that human error and get rid of that, and the machines do a better job at what they're made to do. I think that's going to help the IT people and the end users.
That is what it is. It was AI's fault. At this point, we just have to blame the computers. We have to blame the robots. So, honestly, and that's the only reason we're making robots is so we have somebody to blame that's not us. So, all right. This goes right into our next question from our buddies over at Spiceworks. They have a nice podcast. You should check that out if you're interested in IT and security. But they asked a question that I'm going to start with Derek and ask you based on the last story here. What is the biggest security threat? Is it hackers? Is it, the people who are actively trying to get into your network and get into and access to your systems? Or is it your users, right? Is it the well-intentioned poor person at Experian who didn't update their software? Who's a bigger threat to you and your IT and network security and your AV network security, Derek?
Well, great question. I think the biggest thing you have to protect against is really your own users, because they tend to have the greatest vectors into what you do. And so, humans, we all come in different shapes and sizes and have different motivations. I think a lot of times, people have different motivations, they have different goals, and those are the kind of things that give people opportunity. I think sometimes I think with security, whether it's physical security, getting into something you're not supposed to, or, it's really, because security is sort of a big word, right? But we're talking about network security, and sometimes you're just trying to protect the assets that you have. Other times you're trying to keep folks focused on the things they should only be, have visibility to. So it's a bit of a mix. I tend to believe, hackers, hacking in general has a time element to it, right? There's
Okay.
right. So you have, when someone finds a vulnerability, they usually have to work pretty hard to find it, right? And so that's why you see some security firms, because that's their value. They tend to kind of put their stake in the ground when they find something that's important. It's taken some effort to get there. You don't find a vulnerability every day. And of course, if you're a government agency or a state actor, you don't tell people the vulnerabilities that you know about, because that's the way that you have leverage, right? And so hackers and hacking has a time element. And, as we use technology that introduce time and limit the amount of time you have to do something or try something, whether it's Touch ID or Face ID, for example, you only have so many tries before you get locked out or before some other obstacle gets in your way that you have to leap over. That diminishes, like we were talking earlier, that changes the vector. And what we don't want in our industry, we don't want the AV equipment to be the biggest and easiest vector, because usually the AV equipment is already inside the building. Just think about, I just think about all the AV installations I've worked on over the years with the customers, right? And if you kind of go back to that Rolodex in your mind, just think about how many of those you were able to show your family, right? Because showing people courtrooms in the center of private companies is just, first of all, it's probably the most boring thing, except for us geeks, right? But on the other side of that, you can't really show people those spaces, but you put technology in there that has to communicate to other places. And if you don't do it the right way, especially nowadays, people are going to know all about what's in there. So I think users have more time. I think hackers have less time. And I think this is really a time dependent thing. And look, fear and greed are the biggest motivators, right? So if people have time and opportunity, they may do something, right? But you got to be kind of wired that way. But it's not every day that you're going to find a vulnerability, I think. And I think that the biggest threat is usually your users yourself, because they'll find things quicker because they're actually using things, right?
Yeah, and on a daily basis. So
yes.
Really quick point to Derek's point. Sometimes not only can you not bring your family to see some of these installations, you can't take pictures of these installations just to show them outside. Depending. Brad mentioned that he has some government customers. I have a buddy out in Baltimore, in Maryland rather. His main client, like the only person that he deals with, is the DoD. I know very little about what he does. Let's just put it that way, and his wife knows very little about what he does on purpose. So, All right, Brad, when you are, consulting your clients and designing these systems, who are you designing the security against? Is it going to be hackers, or is it going to be these users?
Yeah, it's going to be the users, and it's going to be the people who are putting the systems in, to some extent, to making sure that we're holding them accountable for the things that we are able to specify and control on their end. And there's statistic that I saw: 63% of confirmed data breaches leveraged a weak default or stolen password. And so, yeah, it's definitely on that user side. There's the social engineering working in there, spear phishing to be able to steal people's account information. And I think that, from our consulting end, what I can do is make sure I'm specifying you need to change the password as soon as you're setting the system up. And we go in to commission those systems, we make sure that they have the passwords that are set. You guys kind of touched on it during last show, suggesting that we need the manufacturers to be stepping up and helping us enforce proper password management. And so somebody was suggesting using the MAC address as the password that gets shipped with. Well, that's something that you can still pull from the system if you're able to get in there potentially. What we've seen, since I touch on everything 70 volt and below in the building, we've seen things in the security industry where they're shipping cameras with project-specific passwords, or the very first step is you have to change the passwords, that force password reset, and that's seeming to be effective. Security is definitely motivated because if they're going in there trying to say we're going to protect your physical security and they become the vulnerable vector, that's very embarrassing. So there's information there. I want to make sure that that's getting passed along to folks like Derek and all the manufacturers. I've been asking everybody who comes in to tell us about their products, what are you doing to force the installers to make this secure, and not just educating them?
Yep, absolutely. All right, that's going to be a good place for us to stop, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Mr. Derek Johnson from Jonkus. I almost said Johnson. Jonkus from Extron. How do people find you, sir?
You can find me kind of all over extron.com. You can also email me at djonkus@extron.com. Let me know what questions you have. But Tim, thanks this is a great show today. This is awesome.
Yeah, I like that. Not too bad for the week before Thanksgiving. We're all still pretty lucid. So, Brad Cult from HGA. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was nice talking with you too. You can find HGA on Twitter at HGA. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Brad Cult with a K, K-U-L-T, and I try and post on there fairly regularly. So go in there, comment on the articles, share them, and hope you guys enjoy.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me because, as I mentioned, I'm a Bears fan. So at this point, I've given up, and I'm rooting for the Blues are playing hockey now. So let's go Blues. But go to the website if you would please, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. And while you're there, please check out our underwriter section. These are the folks who support us financially, and they help us do things like this. Extron is one of them, so we thank them as well. But they help us do shows like this and start new things like our the AV profession, which we are starting to interview business authors. So our first one was my buddy Ian Altman, author of the Same Side Selling book, coming up in about 2 weeks. We're going to be interviewing Stephen M.R. Covey on the speed of trust. So all of that and more at avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the ITAV Show.